Hello, how are you?
Doing great. How you been?
Welcome to America's Heroes Group live stream digital media show. I'm Jenn Wagman, founder, president, and host of Generally Speaking Vets with Jenn podcast, an America's Heroes Group media partner. And October is National Breast Cancer, Mental Health, Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And today is October 30th, and my guest panelist is Mr. Marcus Ferris. Marcus is the Post-Traumatic Growth Director at Mission 22. Among other things, Mission 22 works to eliminate the wait times often experienced by veterans seeking treatment and provides help when they need it most, right now. Its programs for veterans provide long-term help and healing for those dealing with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. And tonight, Marcus is going to touch on all of those with us. Welcome, Marcus. Thank you for joining me today. It's so good to see you. Finally, I'm very much looking forward to talking to you and the work you do at Mission 22. I am a huge fan, as I told you when we spoke over email. At Mission 22, you say not one size fits all. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you so much for making the time tonight. Yeah, we're a company that was founded a little over it's coming up on 10 years now. And the origin story kind of Mission 22 is that our founder, Magnus Johnson, after his several combat tours, came back home only to really confront some challenges that he felt he wasn't prepared for. You know, the military training he went through prepared him for so many moments of adversity downrange, but the adversity that he faced back home when it came to losing friends to suicide and dealing with his own processing of everything that happened led him to kind of survey the resources that were available at the time. And he kept wondering, as he was learning more and more about the mental health issue for veterans, why is it that there are so many resources and yet the problem is still so pervasive? And so it was kind of from that genesis that sort of created the DNA of our company, where we're really like trying to look at things a little bit differently and figuring out what's actually working. And so fast forward about 7 or so years into the company's since its founding, we started what's called the R&R program. So it stands for Recovery and Resiliency. And that launched near kind of the end of 2020. And we've been implementing that now since then. And it's essentially a program where every 3 months or so, a participant will get sort of almost like a resupply box. But the box itself will come with an array of hand-selected books, an array of very specifically selected supplementation, a gym membership, a partnering with a post-traumatic growth facilitator, which is basically a coach who's specialized in working in post-traumatic growth, as well as many other devices that help somebody kind of tap into their own biometrics and to sort of see how there's this cause and effect relationship between the things that they put in their body, the way that they interact with their spouse or whoever in their lives, the way that they work out, how much sleep they get. It kind of opens up that window of realizing that, you know, the individual has more power over how their body's responding, reacting, and healing on a day-to-day basis. And so a lot of our program has been about what does it look like to put the agency back into the individual's hands. And one of the things that we've seen through a ton of surveys of people coming into the program is that one of the biggest things that they're missing out of the military and out of the VA was there's a fine line between, you know, we're going to have you take a very specific step A, step B, step C, and sort of a stepwise program versus like allowing them to have some autonomy to sort of go where their sort of instincts lead them to. And so I think one of the components of the program that isn't necessarily a tangible, it's more of an intangible component, is that we provide a certain structure. We have an online library of educational material, which that right now is actually free and accessible to anyone. It's called Elements, and it can be reached on our site. But basically, you have a certain amount of sort of rails, if you will. So it's like, here are these books, here are the specific supplements that we give you, here are some meditation devices we give you. But then within that, there's a certain level of autonomy that the individual can exercise. So, for example, if there's not, you know, say some material that's really resonating or really matters to them at the moment, then it's totally under their discretion to move on to something that is. And so part of what some people can feel frustrated with in dealing with any kind of conventional mental health care, you know, certainly it's not the case with everyone, but they might be made to feel more like, I am being prescribed this thing that maybe is just being sort of handed down for me from above. Where our model, it's more, here are a bunch of tools in your kit. Let's co-create a plan that works for you and see where we can go and what we can do with that. And we found that that's been really unlocking just magnitudes of post-traumatic growth for the individuals who find our way into our programs.
That's amazing. And so the box that you're talking about, okay, first of all, I stereotypes aside, I'm a girl. I love anything that you talk about with a box that comes once a month. Is that what it is? And is it a subscription? How does that work? Do veterans have to pay for it? Is it part of the funding you receive? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's not so much a subscription box. It's more like if you're a veteran or a spouse of a veteran who qualifies for the program, then it's basically one box every 3 months, and that's at no cost to the individual
That's
veteran.
still pretty good.
That's where, so a lot of our donations, we can draw a straight line between when somebody contributes and life change happening. And in fact, we posted not too long ago a testimonial video of several individuals who have experienced this life change for themselves. And so it is completely free for the veterans for the duration of the time that they're in the program.
That's wonderful. And how do they join the program? Just by visiting your website? How does this work?
Yeah, so there are a couple of application pages. If you go to mission22.com and click on the programs tab, in real time, we're working on generating more funding before we start our next cohort for R&R, but we do have a coaching standalone program that is open and available. And so individuals can go on there and fill out basically the way the application works. Again, this is a service of coaching that in the private sector can be somewhere around $2 to $3 grand, that for a veteran with, DD 214 and all that good stuff, access pretty quickly. And when we say help when you need it most, part of our program, if you're applying for the coaching program and you're willing to write, it's only like a 500-word essay. It doesn't have to be, anything amazing in terms of writing style. It's just like share a little bit about your story, give us sort of a qualitative feel of where you're coming from, read an article, watch a video, and then you go straight to a scheduling link where you get to experience coaching for yourself. And even that is no strings attached. So for someone who, in the coaching space, Jen, I know you'll appreciate this, the power that a coaching relationship can have is hard to understate, but it's hard to explain as well if you've never experienced it for yourself. So currently, part of our...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but is that for someone to become a coach, or is that someone to receive a coach?
Yeah, so it's more for on the client side of things.
Okay.
So we have some videos, we have some, explanation of what coaching is, but a lot of folks don't really understand, like, is this going to be kind of another version of therapy where they're going to really get into some really uncomfortable stuff? And we're trying to help you understand, we'll have one coaching call on a house, and then you get to decide, is this something that you like? Is this something that you want to move forward with? Yes, cool, okay. And then you sort of have a roughly 90-day relationship that's then established.
How are your coaches? How do you get your coaches? Are they volunteers? Are they?
Yeah, so our coaches are, in some sense, they're volunteers. They are paid, and a lot of them have come from the Primal Health Institute. Basically, that was the one that I went through, and I've got a network there, but it's not necessarily exclusive to them. So most of our coaches are national board certified as well. So there is a little bit of credentialing that goes in there. And one thing that we really want to impress upon our coaches is that there's in the clinical space, we talk about cultural competency. Essentially, you could say that a post-traumatic growth facilitator is a health coach that has a high degree of cultural competency when it comes to working with veterans. And in our testimonial video, you'll actually hear about one guy who had this preconceived notion of if my therapist or if my whatever helper person isn't a veteran and hasn't gone down range or whatever, then they can't really understand me. But no, actually, I came to realize, even though that's not really, they didn't go down range, they're still part of my tribe. And so we do a lot to help our coaches, who all of them do a great job of this, to really meet the person where they are and not take anything for granted. And also understanding too that when Mission 22 has a certain level of public trust, And when people come to us for help, they understand like there's something different about that. And one of the things that makes it different, one of the, that DNA I was talking about earlier, is manifest in the coaching relationship that veterans and spouses of veterans can experience for themselves.
I asked you specifically about it because I just spoke with Dr. Julie Elledge, Veterans Talking to Veterans and Mentor Agility. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's she talked about the coaching relationship. And I think it's something that's really interesting and new for me, learning about it. And I think especially in this conversation and this day and age where therapy is in, as she called it, a very precious resource because there's such a limited supply of therapists. And it does take a very long time to get an appointment, whether you're a veteran or a civilian and in crisis. So having this sort of option is amazing. And not only that, but I love the idea that to be trauma informed, that it can be, and you and I talked about this a little bit before too, that you use it as a source of resiliency. Not everybody, it's something that is therapy is required. And not to use the cliche of sitting on a couch, I have tried that before, laying there, and sometimes at the beginning maybe it works, but no, you use it as something to build upon, and for some people it is something you work through, you work on, and I love this concept that we talked about. There's also something that I read about within your organization called Odyssey Coaching. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of what we mentioned before with the kind of 90-day relationship that somebody can have. And Odyssey, it's harkening back, of course, to the journey home, right? The Iliad and the Odyssey. The Odyssey, if we remember, there's a 10-year trip to go to war, but then the return home was also 10 years. So looking at sort of the archetypal pattern there, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that a single week of debriefing between your military service and going to your civilian career is probably not, going to cut it for a lot of folks. So the whole sort of backdrop of that is, hey, let's sort of reintegrate how we think about nutrition, how we think about relationships with others, how we think about even hydration. Right now, we've got and this is going to be available on if you sign up for Elements, that's a free program for anybody who's interested, that it gives you access to what we call the Mission 22 Institute, where we're housing a lot of this educational material. But so the idea of, when we're talking about the hero's journey, of kind of the journey back home, part of that is having a mentor or having some type of, as we like to say, guide by your side. And so that's where the coach, him or herself, comes into play. And all of the coaches that we have also coached within the context of the R&R program, where we have all of those other tools available. So the Odyssey program, the Odyssey coaching program, is like, from the financial perspective, about maybe 20% the cost. But if there's a lot of, we're trying to figure out what's the minimum effective dose of what we can provide in service to the most number of people for the least amount of cost. And so while ideally we have both of those programs running at once, for the time being, our Odyssey coaching program, along with our educational material, is kind of front and center.
Well, I encourage everybody to be donating to you, because, to be honest with you, this isn't something, I listen to this and, you talk about the 10-year journey to war and 10 years back. This isn't, for me, when I started GenVets, I've talked about, I guess because I'm doing so much concentration on suicide prevention and mental health over the last 6 weeks, this isn't just about the veteran's journey, it's about the family journey as well, in support of. And I think that your entire program, especially here, could also be offered, to the family in understanding that journey home, in support of, and also they need to be supported as well, especially in this past 20, 30 years, because the kids and spouses have been affected in ways that we haven't seen before, in their own PTS, and their own traumas. And I think that's being seen in young adulthood and adulthood now in ways that haven't even been measured and understood yet. So the different ways that they should be treated and understood, even when I'm having conversations with different organizations and people within VA colleagues, I think that we still need to be developing those kinds of programs. I hate to continue to say we need to develop more programs, because I do think that you have a program that works. Let's just talk about applying it to already, to a different group of people and making it bigger, because what you have is amazing. But has it been, can we just make chapter, appendix B, appendix C? Because really, I think that these maybe are just groups of people that I feel like are sometimes not included in the conversation. And honestly, there's a reason we have a crisis right now with the suicide rates, but we also have to consider others as well that have also served, and those are the spouses and the children. You think? What are your thoughts on that? Or are you just okay, Jen?
No, it's definitely the case that they're like, if you're in a family context and you're trying to grow out of your trauma and like realize that trauma can be a gift to you if you use it correctly and sort of have somebody to help you through it and all of that. Like, for example, if somebody has been, if they have like full-blown post-traumatic stress, then they're probably going to start to, if they allow it, start to learn how much more connected their minds and bodies are. And we've seen a lot of, I say this not merely as just a theory, but I've seen a lot of people in our program who really start to turn around like, oh man, I had no idea before this how important it was to remove sugar, for example. I just interviewed a guy yesterday who finished our program, and he was like, yeah, over the course of a year, I'm down 30 pounds, and it was just because of the sugar. And then you imagine what, you're lowering the tide on cortisol, on all these stress hormones, on the inflammatory type of fat.
Yes.
So imagine you have one individual in the family who realizes that level of change and growth. But then, so you could imagine too, a spouse might feel left behind in that. And so, it's often the case, maybe not in every case, but it's often the case that a wife will feel like her role is more or less like, I'm the one who tends and mends. And it's a wonderful role to have. But then like what happens when her husband, who is growing from this thing, no longer needs that type of care, that type of help. And she might come to realize like, well, wait, what about me? Like, where do I fit into like the new version? Like, it's great for you that you've grown. I kind of am not sure how to navigate this relationship anymore. And it doesn't make her a bad person. It doesn't mean that there's like a lack of character. It just means that she also needs to have that invitation of what it means to kind of like sort of spiral.
Yeah, that's a circumstance I wasn't even thinking. That's an amazing one. I was just thinking of the dynamics that have been, created over the years, but that's an amazing thought. The sugar people, they kill me because they're right, but it's a tough way to live.
Yeah.
And you're probably one of them, Marcus. I can see this in your face. You love no sugar, don't you?
Well, I'm drinking a Zevia right now, which is sweetened with stevia. That's the most I'll.
Stevia is the best out of all of them. Truvia is my thing, but
yeah. Well, one thing I'm encouraged by is I think that just these types of conversations and raising the overall awareness. So here's another thing too that is kind of at the heart of what we're up to with our programs, and that is that again, going back to kind of the hero's journey type story, the end of the journey is when the hero sort of comes home and has the thing to share to everyone else. So it's like they've gone into the underworld, they understand the pattern of breakdown, renewal, regrowth, and gifting. And so if they understand that pattern, now the next part is now you become the mentor for the other people. And so how cool would it be if it's our veterans specifically who literally went to the abyss and then came back and then spread that for all the civilian population, right?
I have seen that. I have seen some of this where, that type of evolve and change comes, and it is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also I feel like it completes the circle for a culture too. So what I mean by that is in the 21st century style of warfare, it's very easy to sort of like, oh, the war's out there. And then the rest of us are just sort of like, we don't have this like the entire nation is at war type of a feeling. And when those individuals who go down range and they're the ones who make the sacrifice, without the civilian population sort of in their own way making the sacrifice too, then it kind of leaves, it can leave a soldier feeling like, well, what was this for? Like I come back and I look around and people are just sort of like blasé about the freedoms that they have and this and that. And regardless, like sidestepping the issue of like, should we have gone to war, the politics of it all, forget that for a second. It's like the service member went down range and did something, gave up something of themselves for the sake of freedom in itself, a higher good, like an even higher good than the country as such. It's like that drive within them was even beyond the country. And so one of the things that I've written about in one of our modules is the story of Braveheart, right? And so I love Braveheart because, well, for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
But if you remember, everyone knows the famous line, right? He shouts freedom before he's killed. And you might think like, well, he just died stupidly. Like what do you mean for freedom? Like he's dead. What do you mean free? But then it's a higher good. Like preserving your life is a good, but it is not as high a good as sacrificing for the spirit of freedom, right? For sacrificing for the higher thing that orients everybody together. And it was because he gave up his life that the rest of the country was galvanized behind that similar spirit and united everyone. So my encouragement to fellow service members who feel like all of that stuff with Afghanistan or whatever, insert name of war here, right? That it's like, what was it even for? It's like I can totally understand why it would be that someone would feel just like that sacrifice was for nothing, if the outcome that we see isn't what they thought. But then, well, if we step back for a moment, well, man, maybe it was for something way bigger that we can't quite see yet.
I really like what you said in the context of, I have spoken about this on a couple of other episodes, but I'll say it again because it's this important. I participated in a forum called Military Thriving Change Forum last week at Georgetown University, and it was by the Zero Mills Foundation. Kevin Schmeigel and his wife Laura put this together. It is a conglomerate of businesses, the Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, nonprofits, everybody coming together to come up with a solution to the declining interest in voluntary service, in patriotism in general, in the thought process that it is me, and it's all about my freedom versus, as you're saying, the greater good, the greater concept of what it is to be fighting for something, and that freedom. It's not just stupid to die, but he did for something, and that's so that everybody else could and understand that. And so, what you are doing here, and if you can follow me here, finding something greater out of the post-traumatic stress, all of the what comes, the bad things, because that's what we focused on in these smaller groups. The negatives that come from war and what it is to serve, and the things that people may why parents may not want their children to become interested in serving, because we're looking at, do we go into middle schools, elementary schools to start getting kids interested in joining the service? Well, why parents wouldn't want that? For these very reasons. We see all the things that are happening now, increase in veteran suicide and military suicide, active duty. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not all bad. And you're giving a good reason why, you can grow from some of these things as well. And it's not necessarily something that has to end in your defeat and your demise. If it is something that you can turn into something bigger, and that you can take what the trauma that you have endured and make it something that you grow from. And I really, if I'm understanding, if what I've said is not putting words into your mouth, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the younger generation can have plenty of reasons why they might be averse to volunteer type experiences. Like, I see that as like, there's so many things that are at play right now. I'm going through a course called The Boy Crisis by Dr. Farrell, and he talks about the rates of fatherless homes across so many different demographics that, you can only imagine what that does to a young boy's health and psychology. And when boys aren't doing well, neither are girls. Like we're in this together. And when the father is gone, that leads to all sorts of downstream issues. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing, testosterone levels have been going down by about 1% over the last 40 years. And this is work done by Dr. Shauna Swan. You can read in this book called Countdown. And so testosterone is that hormone that makes hard things feel good. And so you can imagine, with all of the milieu of toxicity in our environments that have been contributing to the decrease in testosterone, even like the stereotypical lumberjack dad calling his son, it's like, let's go and chop wood, son, so that our neighbors can, and the son's just low T because of like the food and all the other stuff, and maybe the hormones just aren't there, right? Like we know, for example, that a fetus in the womb, the only difference, well, I shouldn't say only, but a primary difference of it developing into a female or a male is the presence of testosterone. And so if across the board testosterone has been going down, maybe just if we were to take a look at it from that lens, and so on and on. So that's just two examples. So why aren't people volunteering? Lack of a cultural, like an actual shared cultural narrative of like, these are our culture's values. So there's a lack of that, a lack of fathers in many cases, a lack of hormonal health. So it's kind of this milieu. And so that's why having, again, going back to like the veteran who's been through it, having that person as like the new scoutmaster, as it were, or maybe literally in some cases, is for my part, like in many ways, when the veterans come back home, the rest of culture does too.
That's great, and that's part of what we're looking for in creating the change and coming up with solutions and not forward-thinking ideas. Maybe you should be a part of the next one. I'm sure Kevin would enjoy your insight and input.
I'd be all about it.
Well, I do really appreciate your joining. I do want to ask one more, if you can answer it really quickly. The video that you and American Valor Foundation partnered to create, United We Heal. How did that come to be?
Oh yeah, that was the documentary that's available. I believe it's on Amazon right now.
Okay.
That was a multi-year effort that, from my understanding, Magnus Johnson spearheaded a lot of that. It chronicles several stories it kind of starts with a story from a World War II veteran, and then kind of leads into what Mission 22 has been doing circa 2017, 2018, where basically you have a bunch of these different groups who are figuring out like, oh, this is what it means to kind of reinvent myself now. This is what it means to share share our hearts in vulnerable witness, as opposed to just like exposure and judgment, which is what social media is. And so it's a kind of an exploration in what happens there. And then that all has led into our national monument, which was unveiled not too long ago in, I believe it's Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. If you're anywhere near the area, I would highly encourage you to go check out that national monument.
I might have to get there. Every country song is about Oklahoma right now, so you know what, I might. But it is brilliant. Check it out. I'm all about this foundation and you, and I hope you'll come back and visit. Thank you so much for being a guest tonight, and keep up the good work. And really, I appreciate your being here tonight. So. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again, Marcus Ferris, Mission 22.
Thanks, Jen. It's a pleasure.